So, hi, Chris.
Hi, Christina.
How's it going?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well, and it's not a pat answer. Like I like to think about it, and I am well. I woke up well.
Excellent. Well, I am also well, and I have a very needy cat right here. So, what's on the agenda for today?
Well,
Meow.
I think it's probably time for you and I to talk about the elections.
All right. I'm scared, but I'm with you.
We've been putting this off for a little while,
Yes. All right.
and well, just begin. So, have you voted?
I have voted.
Okay. And did you drop it off in a box? Did you mail it in?
I mailed it.
Yeah, so did I.
hmm
What I love about it, and we both live in California, but I know that I got a text message once it was received and also got an email.
I did not receive that. I don't know why,
Hmm.
but that's
Well,
okay.
it was from San Luis Obispo County though. So
Oh, okay. Well, I think that for me, I know I've looked online before to see status of like if my ballot had been turned in, and I can see that. So I haven't checked this one, but I know if I log in and look it up, I'm sure it'll be there.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, if it's not, I'm going to be worried because then something happened. But I dropped it in the box. I always drop things in. It's a mailbox, the big blue one,
hmm
not the election special box because I don't trust those, but right. So
Right.
I will tell you when I got my ballot, because I think in California they mailed them out in October 1st. Now, I do want to start off by saying that I have been absentee and mail in for pretty much every single year since I've been 18 years old. That's over 20 years.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because I didn't live in the United States for 12 years. And I just think it's easier for me, a person who's working every day, to not have to go stand in a line in a poll. Now, I understand there's early voting and all of that now, but I just don't want that. I want to be methodical in my choices because sometimes on the ballot, I don't really know about the choices very well. So instead of like studying before I go, I want to have all my materials out. And it's kind of a big thing for me to think through the entire process. Now, when I got my ballot, it was the beginning of October. It was the same night as the vice presidential debate. And that ballot did not enter my house for over 5 minutes. I was so like, I ripped it open, read the instructions. I went straight to the presidential race. I marked it with gusto and I was like, yeah, I'm voting. And then, I chilled out and I looked at the election, the local things and the props and kind of tried to think through that, but pretty fast because I wanted it in, I wanted it out as fast as I could. So it didn't even see my house for very long before it was out in the mail. I ran, just slammed it in. I was gonna make a TikTok about it, just how passionate I was to
Dunk
like
it.
get it in and
Little
just
mid
dunk it
range.
in. That's right. It just dunk it in. So how about you?
Yeah, Meredith dropped it off of the box for me.
Mhm.
What was interesting about this, so yes, and what was interesting about voting here as opposed to in Santa Monica for the last 4 years prior, or Chicago for 2 decades, prior to that. And Chicago politics are a whole separate ball of wax, bless you. The What was interesting about this, so the largely in the states that I've lived in Illinois, briefly New York, and then California, they're all Democratic states and have been for the last 30 years, roughly. So voting for Fed at the federal level doesn't really make that much of a difference as long as you have the electoral college system. What was fascinating about this ballot experience for me in San Luis Obispo was the folks running for city council and these other positions. So we had life coaches, restaurateurs, people that had been, retired professors. It really was this very diverse set of people and life experiences that wanted to jump in and make a difference, and thinking that they are uniquely qualified to be able to do so. So that was pretty cool, was the hyper locality of the experience for me. I mean, San Luis Obispo has probably 80,000 people here, and half of them are students, and it's a slight exaggeration, but it's it's a small place and it's a small county relative to Santa Monica or Los Angeles or Chicago or New York or anything like that. So that was really cool. It's like, yes, of course I'll vote for a life coach, right? Or of course I'll vote for the restaurateur. It was a really neat experience.
Well, that's very, very unique, because I also vote LA County, and I guess that's very similar to being in Santa Monica, because that's also LA County, correct?
That's correct.
And very locally, the very local stuff is, of course, is local to Long Beach and not Santa Monica. But the local candidates here, they were, I think it was California State Supreme Court. There was a couple of options for that, and they were all just lawyers and professors. But on the local level, there was one race for, oh gosh, I can't recall it, Long Beach, one of the universities. And there were 3 people running, and I remember getting flyers in my mailbox about that. And usually I hate flyers, but I remember seeing 2 of the candidates' flyers, right? I remember seeing signs for one of the candidates. Let's say that now, okay, so the third one I don't know much about, right? So it's between a man and a woman. And the man, I have seen his signs in people's yards. I've seen his signs on people's businesses. Now, the woman, I've seen her Facebook ads, and I've also seen her, the cards that she sent out in the mail several times. So I made my decision based on, I knew some of the local businesses and how, because now everyone wears their political affiliation like a badge or like armor, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone's kind of ready to fight. And I know those businesses that I'm against, like their political affiliations. And based on that, I was able to conclude, that guy, I think he's running with this party. I do not want anyone like that near me. Mm-hmm. So I voted for the girl, because that was the only logical way I could make the decision. I couldn't find any more information at that time.
I did the same thing. I'm like, well, I think they identify as a female if it was a toss-up, right? Discernment.
Yeah.
It's I finally got to take a shower. So it's our end of our fiscal quarter at work. So the lead up, which ends on Friday. So the lead up to this is pretty intense. And I was like, oh, that's right, we're doing a podcast. I need to actually shower. And while I was in the shower, I was thinking about the topic, and I was like, yeah, it's probably time to talk about democracy. And so I have 3 sons. One is 13, and he's by marriage. So he's a stepson in Hudson by actual terminology or nomenclature, but very much mine. And then Holden and Zachary, who are still in Chicago. Holden is in the reserves. He's finishing up his undergrad. He's actually being called up on November 1st, right? So in Chicago, they're there for at least a week, if not for a full month, to help with the elections and just make sure that things are orderly. And this was ordered a month ago. And Zachary as well. So Zachary's not in the reserves. He's done with the Army. He's in school full-time, law student. And when being in Chicago, when President Obama was running, and he was what at that point? He was 58-ish now. Then he was probably my age, if not younger, which is like super, super young as far as I'm concerned. And I remember them going to Grant Park because they saw someone who was just like themselves, who was mixed race, part African American, part Caucasian or white, and as someone that they identified with. And for them to have been roughly 13, 14, 15, 16 years old at the time, to see someone who looks like them and resembles them, gave them such significant hope. And it was a watershed moment for many of us, particularly those of us in Chicago. And then, he wins. We get through 2008. So they went to, I think I was out of town, but they went to his acceptance speech, right, in Grant Park. That was a warm November night. And
wow. Wait, you were actually there?
I wasn't there. My boys were.
Oh, just your boys. Okay.
Yep.
But still, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So much hope. They see someone just like them, like things are going to be okay. And this is on the heels of George W., who I voted for, right? So admittedly. So I am a registered independent, and you don't have to share what you are, but I like to at least come in there and make up my own mind. And you fast forward a couple of years later, it was probably 3 years later, if not pretty soon, like at least halfway through his first term. And they were so disenfranchised with President Obama. And when I was thinking about this, it was the hope that we put into individuals, looking externally for some sanity or some guidance, compassion, empathy, policies that are going to serve all, right, or one for all and all for one. And for many reasons, I don't think his presidency was as effective as it could have been, or as many people wanted it to be. And leaving that discourse aside, it got me thinking about this election. And I've been thinking about this election for some time, right? And it's when we just take a back step and look at this year, 2020. So there's a global pandemic. We're going into round 3. It's fires, floods, failing democracies, oppression, marginalization, cold-blooded murder. You can just pick a crisis and throw it in there. And I think, like the psychics can come on and they could have picked any one of those things at the beginning of the year and would have nailed it, right? And while we may have thought that any one of these singular events were possible, no one could have thought that it would happen all at once. But here we are. We're one Pentagon release away from extraterrestrial relationships, and that's 2020. So going back to the spring when the pandemic hit, so pre-George Floyd, and I was doing a lot of writing and meditations and just sorting through my state of being. And there's the kitty cat. The title of it at that time was On Purpose and Finding Meaning in a Global Pandemic to Truly Live. That was the working title. But then George Floyd was murdered. And this is another instance in a long line of overt systemic racism, and more shocks to the system started to happen. So my attempt to organize my thoughts and feelings and emotions quickly began to devolve from 250,000 words into, holy shit, where's my oxygen mask? I mean, I think On Purpose is still a great title, but it's so much more now that everything has changed. And for those of us that find ourselves in leadership roles, whether it's management or professionally, personally in your community, I'm willing to bet that this is an unprecedented time for you as well. So in addition to our careers, we may play leadership roles in our communities, church groups, civic duties, families, friend groups. And in this continuum of endless Zoom meetings, it's so easy to forget the most important aspect, which is preserving self. So the anxiety and stress of always having to be on and being plugged in and being ready to go. And oh my God, where's the top that I can wear because I'm going on this call. And just not being able to turn off the lights from time to time or stop and maybe just smell some of the flowers as opposed to all of them. It can be really overwhelming. And as I kept asking, like, how can I help? And the answer consistently and loudly was work on yourself.
Same with me.
Okay. Now, when we get this message, it requires discernment. and willingness to, there's Neil Donald Walsh. I don't know if you ever know who Neil Donald Walsh is, but he wrote like the Conversations with God books, and fascinating guy. But his, to tell the truth about ourselves to ourselves and then to other people. So telling the truth about ourselves to ourselves, well, it could take lifetimes. And this is probably not the place to talk about the global system with healthcare and food shortages. I mean, and other news, people's credit scores are rising, right? And people have more money in savings in the U.S. than they did before the pandemic started across the board. So leaving that aside, and fundamentally, our government is not an accurate representation of its citizenry. This is by design. So at the federal level, our Senate, executive, and as of last night, the judiciary are grossly skewed relative to the ethnicities and religious or spiritual beliefs of its population. This point cannot be argued. One can win the popular vote and yet lose the election for president. We don't have a Muslim. As far as I know, we don't have the LGBTQ community represented in the Supreme Court. We have 6 Catholics. I was born Catholic, and even 6 out of 9 or 10 or whatever it is. It's like, well, it's a lot, right? As much as I love Pope Francis and his, I like to envision Pope Francis having a couple of drinks and then just saying wise things, and then people try to take him back. It's kind of like the opposite film of President Trump. But I like the negative. But what's the answer? I mean, we are. We, the people, are the answer, the voters. And so we attach ourselves to some party. We place ourselves on the spectrum. Either you're off to the right or you're off to the left, and this is where I sit, or you're too liberal or too right wing, whatever. But then we leave it to our elected officials to run things. Rarely do we investigate what is actually being done. We blindly believe what our leaders and what the media says. You can pick the media that best suits your own sensibilities and just ascribe yourself to that, and you get into this continual feedback loop of this. I have not seen anything about Hunter Biden coming into my newsfeed, and that I think the whole thing was Trumpified. I mean, I'm sure that he used his family name to benefit himself. We'll talk about that, but they're humans doing human things, right? The voter will likely never make the least effort to know what the person he, she, they voted for is actually done in their official capacity, particularly at the local level and even the Senate level. You just go Democrat or Republican. So in political campaigns, voters become agitated or pissed off, right, about red or blue, liberal or right wing, and not about the interests of good government. And the most successful party politicians are those who can best reach and control voters through their weaknesses, selfishness, prejudices, predilections. And ineffective government will continue while those of us who are being governed are selfish, indifferent, and uninformed. So long as we remain blind to the fact that they get what they give individually or as a whole. So the collective desire of us people will be changed only when we refuse to elect party politicians who appeal to us, even though we know they're wrong, even though we know somewhere that it's not for our highest good or the highest good of the people that we are connected with. Partisan politics is an enemy to us because it divides us. It causes us to be against each other and prevents us from having a united government. So with that, I voted. Now what? Do we hope that Trump loses and civilly leaves office and bigotry and this illusion of separateness magically disappears? Or Biden and Harris win and all of a sudden everything's going to be okay? That's not it. I mean, there's no
Nope.
going back, right? I mean, nostalgia is privileged and it's selective, and it goes against the very principle of evolution. So, do you want an honest government? And if so, it then stands to reason that we ourselves need to be honest. Only then can we have a real democracy and truly be free.
Just a moment. I'm wrestling a cat.
We're gonna add the cat to the cobra, maybe right.
Appearance from my cat Cobra.
Right, cat cobra.
Sorry. Okay. So anyway, deep stuff you're talking about there.
Mhm.
Very wise. So as a human, there's always two sides of me. There's the human side of me, and then there's the soul side of me, right? The human side of me is extremely frustrated and participates in this game of hate and blame. I think it is for someone that cares, like me and most people, I think that is easy to be sucked into very easily. So then it comes down to, you know, who's the bigger enemy? Who's the bigger doofus? Who's the bigger idiot? And I have to really stop myself, first of all, for my mental health. This election has wreaked havoc on my mental health very much. And in fact, I have had to completely close myself off to Facebook almost. I post, but I don't look at anybody's things because it just infuriates me.
Yeah.
And I'm not just infuriated because I don't believe in what they're putting on there. No, it's both sides. It's all sides, and everyone is inflamed with toxicity, really. It's been a very toxic time, in my opinion, as a human. So sometimes I actually, like if you're watching like a scary movie or some kind of suspense and you're really invested in it, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, this is too much for me. And you have to look off screen real quick to kind of center and ground yourself that, oh, it's just a movie.
Mhm.
I feel like I need to do that, but this isn't a movie. This is freaking real life.
It is.
And now that's the human side of me. I'm struggling with the election. And the ego in me as a human has made myself feel better because nobody else can hear it. I mean, at this point, I don't tell anyone what I believe. This is why I am not telling this now, because I believe that you are going to believe what you want. And it doesn't matter what I say. Nobody's going to change. And nobody's going to change me by telling me what I should do or how I should think or that I'm wrong. It's not going to happen. So the ego in me felt very smug and satisfied and arrogant when I marked who I marked and said, ha, I'm saving humanity with my choice. That's what I really felt. I was like, I've got to save us from this dumpster fire that's happening. Whatever that dumpster fire is, because it's all a dumpster fire, and it doesn't really matter, really, who's going to win, Trump, Biden, whatever. It's a long road ahead. It's a hard road ahead for whoever it is, because we have a looming crash in the economy. It's coming. That's what the experts say. It hasn't happened yet for a variety of reasons, and I won't go into any of them because I'm absolutely no expert in any of those areas. But people are really predicting a huge fallout from this COVID. So whoever gets elected is going to have to deal with that. But not only that, is going to have to sustain the blame of the other dissatisfied voters, the other side, whose candidate is not in office. They're going to be like, ha, well, if our candidate was in office right now, then, this probably wouldn't be a problem because our candidate's amazing. And it doesn't matter which one you put into that blank, right? Now, the soul side of me, the soul side sees the bigger picture here. It's like, why are we, because this is American politics. So if you're overseas listening to this, but this is what's real and happening to us. The soul side of us, the soul side of me sees the big picture of what's going on when I tap into it, right? It's uncomfortable for my human side to pause and say, okay, what's really happening here? It's just a lot of shifting. It's a lot of shifting. And I know that's very obscure, but things are changing. And I would say in 1 or 2 years, well, already this year alone, the world doesn't look the same. If I told you last year, Chris, that in October of 2020, you'd be having to wear a mask every time you go into a shop, you wouldn't believe me. You'd be like, mask? What is it? Halloween? What's going on?
Right.
So already the world has changed a lot, and this will stick with us for many years, that we all had to do this until, time has passed and people start to forget, and the new generation comes about and goes, well, I don't remember what was happening, at that time because I wasn't born yet, that kind of thing. So I think next year and the year after, we have a lot of changes in American society. It's exciting. It's going to be uncomfortable, but I think in the end, it's going to come out better. And I know that doesn't feel like that to my body right now. It doesn't feel like it. It feels like, oh, so much doom. It doesn't matter what's going to happen. But I really think that, there will be a renaissance. I mean, at least I like to believe that. Part of me is like, am I just just trying to hope for this? Or do I really believe it? No, I really believe it, because I believe that things that are supposed to happen will happen. Usually. So if this is humanity's time to undergo this kind of shift on Earth, then so be it. Now, I got sent a video the other day, and this might be a little bit off topic here, but we can always bring it back. I got sent a video the other day by my Israeli friend. I do work for her. And her first language is not English, it's Hebrew. And she sent me this video. She said, my mom back in Israel sent me this video. She wants to know what it says. I tried to listen to it. The language is way over my head. What is it about? Long story short, it was by some sort of society, like a white light society. And it was talking about how the first week of November is going to be a huge relief for planet Earth. And then, and I'm summarizing very much here, December 21st, 2020 is a day when the ascension starts, the ascension of planet Earth. I don't know. I have not been informed this. Now, I'm a psychic medium, but I do not ask for prophecies. I'm not interested in knowing, because I know that I need to go with it. I don't want to know what's coming. So I kind of like cut myself off for that. But, cosmically, what's going to happen too? I don't know.
Well, my great grandfather, and I remember reading this article that they wrote about him, and the Jackson Citizen Patriot back in Michigan, and I'll never forget this. And like part of it, they were talking about how he would give people bread during the Depression, like, you'll pay me back when you pay me back. And the quote was, "People are basically good," right? And there's so much wisdom in those 4 words. People are basically good. And which allows for humans to be human, but that they tend to, on the balance, 51% of the time, tend to do good as opposed to do harm to themselves or to others. So it could take us a long time to ascend, or it could take us a short amount of time, but we're going to get there, whether it's on our own or begrudgingly or like through many other means. But we will get there. It'd just be nice to get there of our own volition as opposed to being, pushed into a certain place where it's very much against our will.
So you said that humans are pretty much good, right? Innately good.
Yeah. I said basically good.
Basically good. Basically good. Okay. I would agree with that. I would agree with that label myself.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do have moments of emotional rage where I see a house decked out in what I'm not believing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the human emotional side of me is just like, oh my gosh, you beepity beeps. But then I'm like, no, they're just humans and they're just trying to express themselves. So with that being said, I dated a French guy a couple of years ago, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. Didn't last very long, but he was a very interesting guy and he loved to talk about politics. And he always said, and this is still during, was it still during Obama? It was still during Obama.
Okay.
And he said, oh, Americans, French people love to bash Americans, right? Love to talk about them. Sorry if you're French. But he said, oh, Americans, you guys just take things so personally, politically. He's like, in France, we love to talk about politics. Before dinner, my family will have heated arguments, like screaming almost about politics. And then we stop, we let it go, and we all eat together. And he's like, Americans can't do that. And I was like, okay, whatever, at the time. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, that guy was true. That guy, what he said was true. We're all so in our emotional bubbles. It's just like we don't know how to deal with it. We don't know how to leave it behind us. So right now, people are enemies. I mean, I agree. I'm part of the problem here. And people are enemies just because of their political affiliation, because people are taking it so personally. I mean, I there's one particular person on Facebook. Well, there's a lot of particular people, but that I knew her growing up, and she's just posting all of this, in my opinion, ignorance. And it's all from sources from her side of the fence that are clearly biased, probably a bunch of lies. Don't know. Doesn't matter. I'm still like,
Mm-hmm.
And this person, if I were to see her on the side of the road, struggling, of course I would help her. And she would do the same for me. But right now, like, I just have such a such a disdain for what she's pushing here. But on a normal day, if this emotion were to be lifted, then we would be the nice humans again. But now we're a bunch of emotional head case monsters right now.
There's a gentleman that walks around in our neighborhood. He's probably 63, 65 years old, white fella, wife is Asian. And, he's from Chicago, so we have that in common, and, talking, super nice guy. And one day I was on the phone, because I'm on the phone from like 7 a.m. until like 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever. And I'll just walk around on my phone or on my head just to get some exercise. And I see this like red hat. And I was like, oh, fuck me. Right. And so I'm kind of watching, and I saw the 45 on the side, and I was like, wow, okay. So trigger, right, to your point.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, his wife is Asian. Doesn't mean that someone can't be, have this feeling of superiority, right? So, but there's more to it. I mean, he's a nice guy. Now, factually speaking, like 60% of white males, if not 63%, are pro-Trump, right? So the majority of people that look like me, you're going to run into either they're closeted or they're overt in their Trumpism. Because up until COVID, I think if you were a middle-aged, older white guy, you're doing pretty well. I've made more money under Trump than I did at any other point in my life, right? It's no coincidence. Slight coincidence, but there's tax breaks and everything else. I mean, the economy was really pumping. There's a downside to that as well, and collateral damage. So I don't want to just skip it. It's beside the point. So today I'm out in the garage and I'm on another phone call. I just want to get some sun and see it. And I saw him coming with a hat, and I'm like, I really want to spend time with him. And what I've been trying to do is align one of my walks with the dog to walk around the neighborhood with him and just understand his perspective. He was special ops, that I know to be true. Sales guy, retired with his wife, came out here. So I want to understand, what is it that resonates? Because when I get those visceral reactions to someone, it's like, oh, why not just wear a Klan hat, right? There's more to it than that. And I'm really, really focused on not rushing to judgment and saying, what is it about that I need to explore inside of myself? I mean, I at various points in my life, I've been imprisoned by my own thoughts and beliefs and desires and blindness and narcissism, and just check the box, just go back into all the podcasts. But our own mean-spiritedness and our own greed and our own brutality, either towards ourselves or towards others, it destroys any notion of real freedom that we have. And too many of us believe that liberty, right, that word, gives us the right to say and to do whatever the fuck we want to, regardless of other people. This is naive. Liberty is when we respect and give the same consideration to the rights of other people that we expect and want for ourselves. So, Christina, with what you said about the triggers, what is it that you want for yourself? What do you expect for yourself? How do we go about the liberation of you, Christina King? So you can experience true
liberation from this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think by trying my best right now to not say who I voted for or what I did on my ballot is an attempt at that. I think it's two ways. The first one is that I don't want to shout. I don't feel like I should shout what I believe from any kind of podium. Okay. And even just a mention to me right now would feel like I would be trying to push my agenda on somebody else or my beliefs, because it's just that kind of electric in the atmosphere to me. Mm-hmm. But on the other side of it as well is I know that people are judging others based on their political affiliations at the moment. I do not wish to be judged. Now, you might think that's being a coward. I don't feel that at all, because people are like, well, if you're so confident in what you believe, why don't you just say it? Well, I don't owe anybody to say it. And because that's my choice to operate under this kind of umbrella of protection, it's just how I want to represent myself. I don't want the first thing people to think about is who I voted for, mm-hmm. or what I'm doing, because it doesn't matter who I voted for. Somebody's coming in, whether or not it be, Trump or Biden, someone's coming, and I'm going to have to live with it. It doesn't matter who it was, right? Mm-hmm. I made my statement on my ballot, and that's that. So that to me makes me feel good that I'm doing this, that I am staying kind of cloaked. So to stop the rages, what I try to do is humanize the person, just like you did. It's like I tried to humanize. Why are they behaving this way? And it's the behaviors that I can't stand, by the way. It's the behaving. Mm-hmm. It's the grouping stereotypes on both sides. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's that, well, if you like Trump, or if you don't like Trump, then you're not a patriot. I don't like that. But on the other side, it's like, well, if you don't vote for Biden, then you're not for LGBTQ, Mm-hmm. or, something like that. So I don't like this lump thing. And I know that people would fight me on that. And that's fine. Like, those are just generalizations. And I know not everybody believes those. So that's helped a lot. However, I think the root of it is the behavior, really. It's not the belief. It's the behavior of the collective whole. And I think I'm very disappointed in Americans as a whole. The behavior of this, following lies on both sides and just making up this narrative that fits what they want to believe in their minds. That's what I can't stand. And so if I'm at, let's say, a social gathering with someone that's on the other side of the fence than I am, and this person starts getting smug, what do? That's where I don't have the freedom. It's like I could really, with the emotions, rip them a new one, no problem whatsoever. But would that be with facts? Would it even matter? No, it doesn't matter when you're that emotional. It doesn't matter what you have to say. How do you combat the arrogance, the smugness, the willful ignorance on both sides?
I've got a couple of questions that I ask. Okay, I'm sure you have a great reason for feeling that way. Do you mind sharing it with me? Oh, okay. All right. And just ask open-ended questions. The question that I'll ask is, well, when I say the word freedom, what does that mean to you? What does it mean to truly be free? You're pro-America. You're pro-democracy. I mean, do you think we live in a democracy? Why? I mean, educate me. I'm seeking to understand. Why do you feel like we live in a real democracy? When I say liberty, what does that mean to you? Like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and bringing it back to the Constitution, quite frankly, or even the Declaration of Independence. Because the one thing that everyone, the platform from which anyone that's at least in the U.S. can operate from, is at least the perception that we're all created equal, and that we have the Constitution as a baseline. It didn't. It puts the power of the government in the hands of the people, right? And I think that's what all of us, at least theoretically, want. And it's the greatest thing that was ever given to a country at its genesis, and the people really desired freedom. Now, again, we're skirting over a lot of things there and the attachments to it, but for all of us to have been given this clear right to be, to will, to do, or to have anything which he, she, or they are able to be, will, do, or have. But if the people aren't invested in having and in holding the power of self-government, then that power is going to be taken from us. And then instead of the government being dependent on the people, right, the people that we elect as our representation, as our representatives, then we're dependent on the government. And that's the goddamn situation that we find ourselves in right now.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done. I get that. And with the advanced state of the media and the feedback loops and misinformation, it's so easy for us to just Netflix and chill and to be deluded, which makes it all the more important that we remain alert and informed and ask questions and not victimized by partisan politics. The Constitution didn't say, hey, you only get two parties, red or blue, go. I mean, according to the Constitution, power is not to be with any party or person. The people are to have the power. It just hasn't worked out that way.
No, it hasn't. And I mean, that's good advice about the questions.
I just
That's
ask
really
questions.
good advice.
Yeah, tell me about yourself. It's the advice I give to my boys. Like, even when you find yourself in a social situation where you have social anxiety, you just get people talking about their favorite subjects, which is themselves. Like, oh, I'm sure you have a good reason for feeling that way. Do you mind sharing it with me? Well, tell me more. Well, I'm sure you didn't come to the conclusion on its own. What's been your experience with that? And what else? What else? What else? And just understanding, because ultimately what I'm looking for is that aspect of myself and that person that's triggering. Because whenever I've been triggered by someone else, it's because I recognize something in them or what they're saying that makes me slightly disgusted with my own self and how I'm operating in the world.
Oh, well, that's pretty wise right there. That's a good one. No, I didn't even think about that.
That's where I was going with it, right? And to bring it
Yeah.
back to yourself, and what is it about that person's behavior? Let's look at Trump and his taxes, right? So he paid $750. If I made that much money and I only paid $750, nice job, Mr. or Mrs. Accountant, right? Because that's the system. That's the system that we
It's a
set up.
system. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? Why would I fault him for that? Why would I fault Hunter Biden for trading on his good name? Holden took a job with my friend, working in his real estate business or his construction business. It's because someone who knew someone. That's how things work, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, I kind of take those things with a grain of salt because I'm like, well, that's life. And I also have to, well, first of all, I want to say I can't wait for the storm of the political season that we're in just blows over, because next week the election's done, then all the commercials and all of the signage are done. It's gone. I was trying to relax on Saturday. Now I'm undergoing some treatment, which I will address in a later podcast, much later probably. I'm undergoing some treatment, and this was my first weekend where I was kind of feeling like a different person because of it. And I gave myself permission to play a game on my phone. And I played my favorite game. I don't pay for this game, right? So there are ads that pop up. Well, guess what? In my zen of playing the game and making myself happy, every 3 minutes an election ad would pop up in stream, and I couldn't fast forward it because you have to wait for it to finish playing. And I was just like so enraged and just like, oh, I'm sitting here, and I felt like a victim, which I'm the worst. Like I hate when people play the victim. And here I was like, oh, poor me, I'm trying to play the game and just seeing some political ads. And I was like, no, buck up, lady, because this isn't going to last forever. Just sit here, laugh at it, and move on. And that's what I had to do. I just had to kind of take it lightly and move past it. But as far as the system works, a lot of people get bent out of shape on how the system works. And that's great. If you feel that, something is wrong with something, yes, speak out, vote against it, vote for what you want, take action, protest. Yeah, I'm all for it. But when I come to my own personal responsibility, I get very offended when people fault me for not doing enough. And I'm like, doing enough for what? Doing enough for who? Because ultimately it comes down to myself. There are a lot of causes that I think that I should be helpful with, but I think that as far as how the system runs, I do not feel called to push for change in that. I don't feel like that's my fight at all. I mean, yeah, and that helps a lot with trying to settle myself down and set boundaries with what I believe and how these beliefs or beliefs that are on my own are going to make me feel.
Well, you mentioned game, and that's interesting because this is our own fault, right? And for those of us that become indignant, like, I can't believe the Republicans are doing this, or those fucking liberals, whatever. This is our fault. And we're the ones who are responsible. Yet our past actions have said that we are completely incapable of taking care of ourselves. We prefer others to run the government for us. we don't look into the character of the people that we elect. We're easily deceived because of our own fawning, and that encourages them to be mesmerized, right? So the politicians play the game, but guess what? We're the game.
Yep.
We are. Now, this is all, at least on my side, I mean, I'm very passionate about this. But it's like borderline ranting. So to your point, like, how do we address it? I mean, how can we make this work before our imperfect democracy is taken from us? Because I think we've all at least seen where this could go into an autocratic state pretty quickly. And you say this is all over next week, and
the ads are over. The ads are over next week. That
right.
was my point.
Right.
No, it's not over next week. It's just the beginning, I'm sure.
Well, I think it's not that the world, it doesn't need to be safe or made safe for democracy. It's the people who must be made safe for democracy and for the world. The biggest risks that we have are ourselves, and even in just a handful of individuals. We can't have a real democracy. And by democracy, I mean self-government, the ability to govern oneself, until each of us begins to have self-government at home, right? When I look at like Trump's finances or Biden's finances or whatever, and today a real life example where our CFO reaches out and says, "Hey, I noticed on your expense report that you're claiming, like $100 for your phone bill, and I'm going through this, and it should be only $54." And I was like, "Well, I thought it was like $100." And I've had my own issues with expense reports in the past, or certainly trying to game the system. But I was, one, concerned that I wasn't getting the full amount reimbursed, and then two, I was really concerned about the perception. Now, there's a lesson that I've learned. It's like, I can't sit here and point the finger at somebody else, because that thumb's pointing back at me. So how do I operate with integrity in my own internal system, at my employer, to make sure that, one, I'm being responsible to myself and my personal finances, but also being responsible to the people that I work with and for. So I'm making sure that my own shit's like okay first before I sit there and talk about someone else. But when we're shown that we help make these rules, or we make these laws by which we live and we're governed, and when we understand that our purpose or our destiny in life is constructed by our own thoughts and acts, then it will be self-evident that we can't do to someone else what they would not want others to do to them. Right. And this illusion of separateness. And I think this is where, and I'm going to kind of bring this back into the work that you and I really do. But the old way has been like the one or the few against the many, or the many against the one or the few. Right. That's how it's been. Whether it's this expression or past expressions, that's what I see. The new way, or the way that we're being presented with, and coming into this ascension that begins on December 21st, which feels right, is the one or the few for the many, and the many for each one and for all. This is the right way of life. It's the golden rule: do unto others as you want someone to do unto yourself. This is the right way of living in a real democracy. What's against the interest of Christina King is to the disadvantage of everyone. And we're not going to get there. I mean, the polarized world that we live in, right? So this is very, I don't say forward thinking. I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal here, but this is a desired state of being or a way of living. But the fundamental fact about democracy, it's when what's against the interest of the individual is to the disadvantage of everyone, has never been dealt with, at least not in these 250, 300 years. And because of that, democracy has not worked in every past civilization when it's come to this nexus point with which I believe that we're at right now. It's on trial now, and it has been for 100 plus years. So now when we go to the ballot box, we're determining the kind of self-government that we'll have tomorrow. Do we continue in this devious way of make-believe Chinese democracy, where we think that we have freedom and liberty and the pursuit of happiness? Or do we begin to do this introspection and take the straight way to real self-governance and waking up? There's a danger in waiting, And now's a good time to settle this question. Will the people have a democracy in name only, or will we become a real democracy? It's not just that 5 people can do this. And to date, the greater number haven't shown that they understand or have thought at all about what a real democracy is. But when the people become conscious, when we become conscious that we don't need to fear anyone more than ourselves and our own worst proclivities and these things that embarrass us and the things we've done in the past that would bring shame onto us or our family, and just the things that embarrass us. If civilization is going to continue, then we have to become responsible for ourselves. We're able to respond, but there's no other way. Only a few people can be blamed for what's happened in the past. But every one of us can be blamed if we continue to make the same mistakes that we made yesterday. This isn't just for ourselves. This is for our children's children. And to think of, I believe in reincarnation at a very, I'll say that basically, but let's just suppose that that's true. What world do I want to come back to? I'm not just doing this for Hudson or Holden or Zachary or their kids or their grandkids. But if I come back in 300 or 400 years, I'd want to think that some of the work that we're doing today will be made manifest so that we can come back and continue to evolve the species. This is, the fundamentals are excellent, but God, the preferences and the prejudices and weaknesses of the people really prevent these fundamentals from being brought to life. Well, we'll have an opportunity to progress. Whether it happens sooner or later, I don't know. But this door to true democracy and self-governance is to constantly progress in our own capacity and to become conscious of what one truly is. What one truly is. Who am I? Who am I really? This is the door to freedom, to liberation, to self-governance, to the democracy of your own soul, as within, so without. I just dumped a lot there in a little bit of time, but it starts with democracy and ends with who am I?
Yeah.
Really? So it's not them.
So that's the question. What is it going to take? It's going to take your internal look at yourself, right? Now, on that note, there have been some memes being passed around in the last couple of months that say, I miss the America of September 12th, 2001. And those kind of upset me very much. And the reason why, because, on September 11th, that's when, everything happened, the September 11th event. And then on September 12th, according to the meme, that's when everybody started being nice to each other and patriotic, right? Mm-hmm. Now, yeah, I remember that time. You do as well. And I was not in New York. My grandmother was. She did volunteer for the Red Cross and went down to Ground Zero. She still can't talk about it. But I remember her saying how nice everyone became in New York. Because I guess the stereotype, maybe a bunch of truth, is that New Yorkers are abrasive and not so nice or not so friendly, right? Not so courteous. So now everybody became like that because, the tragedy brought them all together, and to kind of reach out to others because everyone was experiencing some really uncomfortable things and feelings and thoughts and all kinds of things. And this rippled throughout the entire country, of course. So the reason why I was upset by the meme is because what is it going to take for us to be like that? It's a flip of the switch if we all just did it. Mm-hmm. if we all just decided that that's the way we wanted to feel towards others, then we could do it. We don't need a tragedy. We don't need what felt like the end of the world at the time to remind us that we should be courteous to each other and we should be humans and nice humans and support each other and things like that. So by posting that meme, it's like they hate the American now because everyone had, they're separated. No one's united. There's no United States anymore. It's all the separate states, depending on what you think, right? And really, that's all it would take, but that's too easy. And, nobody knows.
Well, we're still under attack. And I love that you said that we don't need another tragedy to bring everyone together. But so long as others are focused on separateness and not what ties us together, right? And when you begin to investigate and explore and sit with yourself and ask who you are, invariably you come to a conclusion that you're connected to the person next to you. And that's where I think the answer lies, is doing that work. But that's something that has to be experienced and a path that has to be walked on your own, not something that someone else can do for you. The answer doesn't sit in a book written by an old man in the sky. It's right here.
Yeah. So for soul work, I think I need to be in on this. I need to do my own because I am definitely affected by the emotional atmosphere of the times. And I'm definitely having my own internal outburst and resistance and denials and emotions tied around all of that. So I think that I and anyone else that feels called to do this, go inward. Sit with who you are and sit with yourself and explore the energetic boundaries that you have around yourself. And if you are really committed to yourself and committed to society and humanity as a whole, which I would say that I am because I am a participant, I'm a citizen. And start to broadcast love to yourself and broadcast love to others. And I'm being told to focus on the flipping the switch. Flipping your switch is the freedom, I'm being told. It's the freedom that will allow you to be your best version of yourself and an example for yourself and for others to see. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be seen and like, hey, everybody, I'm a great person. Not at all. Really, the test of a person is who are you when no one's around and you're just sitting by yourself? What are you doing and what are you thinking? That's who you really are, right? So this is for your own peace of mind and the peace of society, is to start to live the way you want society to live as well. What about you, Chris?
Work on yourself.
Yep. It's that simple.
I think I know that when I find myself being triggered, that my new normal is to say, what is that aspect of myself that I find revolting or repulsive or that's just triggering me? And invariably, I find something there that needs to be worked on.
I'm also going to do that as well. Thank you very much.
Love you.
Love you. Thanks. And again, it's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks for letting me get on the soapbox today.
Oh, it was awesome.